Hey there, good evening. Nice to see you. This is the Bronx Buzz, BronxNet's program where we talk with reporters and writers and journalists and editors and all different people who are putting stuff out in the Bronx so that you can kind of follow along and maybe get some inside information as to what really is going on in our borough of the Bronx. And in our second segment, we're going to have a little fun and we're going to talk about the Bronx Summer Jam, but we'll put that aside for the moment and say good evening to Chris Janaro, who is the zoning and development reporter with City Limits. Nice to see you, Chris.
Nice to meet you. I'm glad to be here, Gary.
I do want to say, in addition to that work, you are a Newmark Veterans in Journalism Fellow because of your status as a Navy veteran. So, of course, we all appreciate your service in that way, especially coming after Memorial Day. It's always nice to remember people who sacrificed and did all that stuff. But let's get right to it. You wrote a story called The Council Pushes for More Housing Funds as City Budget Negotiations Enter the Final Weeks. The City Council is pushing for an additional $3.66 billion for affordable housing over the next 5 years. People talk about what's the biggest problem in New York City: housing, affordable housing. Where are we at? Is it somebody going to have to twist the mayor's arm? Are we going to make this happen? Where are we at?
I think so. Where we're at, it's been an ongoing thing.
I know it's not fair for me to put all of that on you, but I did ask you the question. I can't deny it.
The mayor made a moonshot pledge of 500,000 homes over the next decade. And
I mean, is he having a problem to stick to that pledge? Is that what the issue is? So now the council members want to hold his feet to the fire?
The council members want to hold his feet to the fire. And additionally, the New York Housing Conference had a report that came out that showed that they were projecting like 32% less, a decrease in the affordable housing units that would be financed with capital subsidies.
Let me just ask you that. Why would that be? You know, we all know we need more affordable housing. Why wouldn't government, whether it comes, through the budget or some other way, find a way to do better and help the mayor achieve the 500,000 new homes?
I mean, I think you with all the budget negotiations, even outside of HPD, which is what we're really talking about,
right.
Homes and preservations, I think, and this is speculation on my part, because only the mayor can really say, but we had the pandemic, which may have weighed into things a little bit, but additionally, and again, this is a little bit of speculation, Mayor Adams has his City of Yes coming up, which is going to make it a little bit easier as far as zoning, to get things built.
So he wants to emphasize that rather than the other plan that he talked about beforehand. That's what you're suggesting.
Well, again, this is me speculating to a degree.
No, that's fair. Sure,
but along with with the state's budget, we have a new tax incentive. I think it's a 45X to replace 421A.
All right.
So if I were to speculate, I would say that the mayor may be seeing like, oh, well, we have these other things to help encourage housing, so maybe we don't have to spend quite so much out of the city's coffers.
Do you think also, in the mayor, in some ways, I'm going to use it just a street term, he was spooked by the migrant crisis, and that he's got to figure out, he's got to navigate that. Now I know the state put out, I forgot the exact number, was something like $3.2 billion or something like that toward the migrant crisis to help New York City out. But, it's not going to solve it. And people need places to live. And, instead of building, temporary spots in places like Orchard Beach, which didn't go very well, maybe he's feeling like, I don't want to spend money on this. As you said, I've got the other plans. Maybe we can emphasize those, and then I don't have to come up with capital money for affordable housing. That's my speculation.
That's and I mean, this all comes down, this is like something we see during the budget dance, so to speak. And right now we have, progressives particularly are pushing for, with some of the extra money that they're asking for, there's two programs primarily through HPD that they're hoping to fund. One is called Neighborhood Pillars. It's for non-profit community development type corporations to rehabilitate and convert apartments. It was originally started in 2018. But after 2020, it ran out of funding. But they did notice that it did some good. I think it preserved about 400 apartments through that program. Additionally, the other program they're hoping to fund with a good portion of this extra money is what's called the Open Doors, which is for new construction to build co-ops and like collectively owned.
Right. To give some home ownership. What's the timing on this like? I mean, we know that the state budget was 3 weeks overdue. Is the city going to be and July 1st is the deadline?
Yes.
Do you anticipate this being resolved by then? Or, we're going to go into the heat of the summer? I mean, what's your sense about how this is going to play?
I mean, it's hard for,
who knows?
If I were a betting man, which I've been known to be, I'm cautiously optimistic that something might get done. I really think that the council is, the progressive caucus of the council, as well as the council as a whole, seems pretty on board with this.
There's some
demand.
unanimity over this. Wow. I want to move ahead. You mentioned the city of Yes, and part of that is this basement legalization plan. Why don't you explain what the basement legalization plan is? And you did a story, advocates, lawmakers are baffled by the exclusions in the basement legalization plan. So let's define our terms, and then we'll see why that they're, as it says there, Sandy Nurse said she was surprised and angry.
Yes. So this isn't the first time we've had a basement apartment pilot, which is what that headline had to do with. So initially, a few years back, and the year specifically, I can't remember off the top of my head, but relatively recently, Brooklyn Community Board 5 was kind of like the test ground for this new basement apartment legalization pilot, and it ran into.
Let's just define that term. So that means that people who were using their basements, maybe renting it out illegally, maybe
Correct.
stuffing it with more people than probably were allowed, all of a sudden, some of those rules would be relaxed, and they would be able to actually use those basements for, what they wanted without getting that kind of approval.
Correct. And, one of the main hindrances to the success of that original program was the state's, it's called the multiple dwelling law. And it essentially, for metropolitan areas that have over, I think, 200,000 people, which would be like New York City, there would be stricter rules, safety regulations that come into play for places that have more than three, I think it's three units of housing.
Units, yeah.
So, I have a two apartment building, and I want to convert my basement. That brings it to the third, which brings these stricter requirements, and it brought up the costs to do these conversions. So what the state basically did is they are allowing the city of New York to, they picked 15 community boards, which isn't very many.
And there are 4 in the Bronx, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Just
correct. And I'll add that, the Bronx has, had issues with flooding. I think that, what was it? Bronx Community Board 12, I think, had 2 feet of flooding in some places during Ida. So, this definitely pertains to the Bronx. What this recent thing did, though, is it essentially kicked the ball to the city and said, these 15 community boards don't have to follow the multiple dwelling law. But it's up to the city now to, city planning, to kind of come up with this pilot program. So
Right.
The big kind of scandal that raised a lot of eyebrows was that there was a lot of exclusions. Queens has a lot of flooding. During Ida, they had 11 drowning deaths in basement apartments, and yet only one community board there in Long Island City was selected to participate. And the original pilot place, Brooklyn Community Board 5, was excluded. And it really,
I guess just to summarize before we run out of time, I guess the bottom line is it seems like they're cherry picking here, there, and everywhere. And they're saying, well, if you're going to do it here, why not do it here? They have the same problems, but they got to, it doesn't seem to be a guideline, it's like, well, wait a minute, what about me? That kind of thing. And so that's what strikes me as strange. Also, eliminating parking mandates for new residential development is I don't understand how you can do it. I mean, you can't pretend we don't have a parking problem in the residential areas. I mean, it is. And so by building new buildings and not requiring them to have places for cars, what actually are you going to do? Especially because you're forcing more people. People will own cars, but you're forcing them with congestion pricing to not use them in the city. So they're going to have to park somewhere.
I will say, that's a concern that's being raised, and I know that pertains a lot. It pertains to basement apartment conversions, certainly, but it's also a big part of Mayor Adams' City of Yes for housing opportunity. And I mean, yes, they would be exempt from that. But one thing I have been hearing from some developers that even though they might have these exceptions, there's a good chance that they would build some parking. They're still incentivized to include parking
to do that because to make it more attractive place to live. Listen, Chris Janaro, the zoning and development reporter with City Limits, thank you so much for joining us. We are going to continue to read what you write because how else are we going to know? That's the way it goes. But really, thank you for your time this evening, and we appreciate it. Say hello to all my buddies over there.
Will do. Thanks again for having me, Gary, and pleased to be here.
Yep. Okay, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll lighten it up a little bit, and we'll talk about the Bronx Summer Jam taking place in Bronx Park East. Don't go away.